61-year-old liquor tycoon Vijay Mallya, wanted in India for defaulting on loans, was arrested after he appeared at a central London police station. Scotland Yard acted on India's request for his extradition on fraud charges. Minutes after appearing at the Westminster Magistrates Court, Mallya walked out on bail. His team said his appearance was voluntary. Mallya said the media had blown the story out of proportion. Look at what he tweeted. And I'm quoting here from what he said. Usual Indian media hype. Extradition hearing in court started today as expected. The cases against Mallya, we know, have been piling up since 2015. He fled India on the 2nd of March 2016. That's last year. In January this year, a local court in India ordered a consortium of lenders to recover loans. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley pushed for his extradition on his last UK visit. India gave a note verbal to the UK on the 8th of February this year, and the British government then sent India's request to a district judge, and that is how the proceedings continued. So what happens now? Extradition, we know, is a multi-step process, starting with a judge's decision on the issue of a warrant of arrest, which happened today. Indian authorities called today's development the first salvo. Mallya will now face legal proceedings in the UK to determine if he can be extradited to India to face charges in Indian courts. Joining us this evening, Dr. Karthikeyan. He is a former CBI chief, is with us from New Delhi. We have Harpreet Jiani. He's a barrister who practices in England. He's also an advocate here in India and Dubai. And joining us from Chandigarh this evening, Mandy Clark, our own WION London bureau chief, also with us. Good evening to all of you. Mandy, let's start with you. What happened today? Was it just a routine appearance, routine procedure, as Mallya is claiming?
If it was routine, certainly no one knew about it. What we do know is the UK authorities did arrest him, and then he, as requested by the Indian authorities, as part of this extradition request, he showed up as this is part of due process. Then he is required to show up to the court for a preliminary hearing. Now, the extradition hearing is set for a month's time. That's May 17th, and that's where you're going to see his lawyers, and of course, the Indian government lawyers, argue the case on whether he should or shouldn't be extradited out of the UK. He's on bail at the minute, and that would indicate that the UK government doesn't believe he's a flight risk. Certainly, if he decides to consent, then he can go back to India a lot sooner. But it looks like he will likely fight the extradition, and that could mean this process could last many, many months.
Right. And so what happens from here on basically depends on what courts in the UK decide, Mandy, and the government has, whether in India or in the UK, has a very little role.
Indeed. And even if this judge decides that he can be extradited, he has the right to appeal, and he can appeal numerous times all the way up to the Supreme Court. So he could fight this for a very long time if he decides to accept. If the judge decides that he should be extradited, then it could just be a matter of months. So it really depends on the legal fight that Vijay Mallya is willing to put up.
Harpreet Jiani, if it all depends on the legal fight, let's ask you. You're a barrister. How does the case against Mallya in the UK look at this point?
Well, we have to get this clear that UK courts are not interested in the allegations which are against Mallya or how the trial is going to proceed. They have received a valid request for an extradition of an Indian national from the United Kingdom, and in normal course, they are supposed to extradite him to India. Now, Vijay Mallya is given by law a number of defenses. He can take a number of defenses and say, these are the reasons why I should not be extradited to India. If the court is swayed by any of those reasons, even one is enough, then in that case, the court will deny him extradition. But assuming that the courts are unable to agree with him that any of those special reasons exist, then the courts are bound to extradite him to India.
So it also essentially, Harpreet, depends on how strong a case the British government builds against him.
Well, it's not really a question of the British government. the dossier would have been sent by the Indian government to the UK already. Now, the Serious Fraud Office or the Crown Prosecution Service or whichever nodal agency is now going to act on behalf of the Indian government is going to produce those papers into the court. The fact that a warrant has been issued and a certificate from the Home Secretary was obtained means that they are technically in order. Now, the defenses that Vijay Mallya can take are along the lines of his human rights. He could say, well, you know, my human rights would be violated if I were to go back to India. And if he can show that, then he will not be extradited. Or he could try to argue that the offenses with which he is charged in India are not criminal offenses in the UK, so there is no duality. The same offenses are not offenses in the United Kingdom, and therefore there are no extraditable offenses. He could also conceivably take the defense that although the Indian government has sought his extradition for a bundle of cases or a bundle of offenses, so to say, but once he is in India, he is likely to be subjected to a roving inquiry, or there are going to be additional charges which are going to be brought against him, which have not surfaced so far, and therefore he faces an uncertain future. But the biggest hurdle that the Indian government is going to face is that one created by the Supreme Court of India in the Subrat Roy matter. Vijay Mallya is within his rights to go in and say, look at that, it is likely that if I were sent to India, I would, even without being found guilty, be sent to jail for multiple number of years. And that is something that English courts are going to find very difficult to digest, and he's probably, unless there are guarantees coming from India, he is likely to succeed on those.
So, the Indian authorities, Harpreet, are calling it the first salvo. Vijay Mallya is saying this is routine. Does the truth lie somewhere in between?
No, they are both correct. It's the first routine step in an unusual situation. Extraditions from India are extremely rare. In the last mutual legal assistance matter, which came from India, I was a counsel appearing for the Serious Fraud Office, ultimately for the Indian government, and that was in 2013. And this is the first one after that. So it is unusual in that sense. But within extradition proceedings, this is the routine first step. So both are right. There is no disguising the fact.
Right. In fact, we're waiting for D.R. Karthikeyan, former CBI chief, to also shed some light on how agencies in India are looking at this and what next. In the meantime, let's take a look at what the case against Mallya really is and what is the extent of the fraud that he is accused of. Remember, he owes over 9,000 crore rupees to Indian banks. The Enforcement Directorate has filed a case based on a CBI FIR under the Money Laundering Act. The Serious Frauds Investigation Office in India, or the SFIO, is probing irregularities and diversion of funds. The Employee Provident Fund Organization, or the EPFO, is probing anomalies in PF contributions. Income tax and service tax departments have filed cases for recovery of 32 crore rupees in Mumbai. A Hyderabad court has issued 5 non-bailable warrants for dishonored checks to the GMR airport. The CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General in India, has filed 3 cases for a loss of 290 crore rupees. So this is the extent of the fraud that Vijay Mallya really is accused of. Mandy, it is being said that the Indian Finance Minister's visit to the UK and his meetings with authorities there is what really set this extradition procedure in motion.
In all likelihood, possibly the case. Of course, it all happened behind closed doors, but certainly it's understood that he had pressed the importance of this issue, and that's when the British government took action. Certainly, it's in the British interests to have as close a relationship to India as possible, not just through a legal framework. Currently, the temperature and the mood in India, in Britain, needs strong trade relations, and anything they can do to improve the relationship between India and Britain would certainly be an asset. So they might have expedited this arrest, because it normally takes a bit longer from when the extradition request is put forward to the arrest in the past. So, but that's as far as the British government can go in helping extradite it. From here, it's up to the courts to make the decision whether he should be sent back or not.
So, Harpreet, help us understand how much of it really depends on political will, on diplomatic pull versus what happens in courts now that the matter is in a British court.
Legally speaking, there is no political will required anymore. The process having been triggered by the political decision to actually file the extradition request, the process is now in the hands of the judiciary in that country, and there should be no space for any politicking in there. But pragmatically speaking, there is going to be a certain amount of continuation of political will that is required from India, in as much as we will see multiple requests for information or assurances coming from either Malya's lawyers or from the court itself. And unless there is political will within India to provide that information or those guarantees or assurances in a timely manner, the case is going to fall flat. In the last case that happened between India and England, this is what happened. The information from India was simply not provided in a timely manner, and therefore we got a very sorry figure before the English courts. So is this process dependent on political will? Technically, it isn't. It's supposed to roll on itself, by itself. Practically, the support needs to come from the Indian government, so continued political will is essential.
And what is happening now could have happened, say, 6 months back, 8 months back, because Vijay Mallya left India, fled India rather, in March 2016. Is that how you see it, Harpreet?
It could have happened at any point of time. It could have happened against any other person that India is interested in, who is, let's say, in that legal jurisdiction. There is no threshold, time frame that is required. All that is required is for India to trigger the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty and to say, right, here are the documents, here is why we need this person. We have satisfied the prima facie case requirements. Can we please have him back? And it happens.
Right. So let's see how extradition really works and how has India's record been. Harpreet has spoken about it. How much depends on political and diplomatic pull and how much on legal nitty-gritties? Let's take a look at India's record to start with. An extradition request can be initiated against a fugitive criminal, we know, and India has extradition treaties with 42 countries. India has extradition arrangements with 9 other countries. 60 people, we are told, have been extradited to India so far. And extradition is sometimes confused with deportation, but there is a basic difference. Extradition is the surrender to another country of a person accused of an offence against its law. Deportation, on the other hand, is the expulsion of a foreign national without any punishment imposed. Mandy, what has UK's extradition record been like vis-a-vis India?
The time that someone was successfully deported was in 2002, and that's that was in relation to the Gujarat riot. So we haven't seen necessarily fraud, white-collar crime that has been used for extradition. So this is really a test case in that regard. But the treaty is only back from 1992. So this would be the second only extradition, if it goes ahead, that has been under this treaty between India and Britain.
Harpreet, if is the bigger one, but when Mallya returns to India, what really does he face?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
If Mallya were to return to India, and whenever he does, what does he face, given the charges against him?
Well, I am not his lawyer. I'm not his confidant either, both regrettably. And I have no way of predicting that. That is something I simply can't speculate on, I'm afraid. But if he is sent back to India, then he will be facing the charges which have been leveled against him. He will have, I'm sure, a full opportunity to legally defend himself in the courts of law, and justice will be done.
You make it sound very easy. Karthikeyan, D.R. Karthikeyan, former CBI chief, I'm told, is with us now. Mr. Karthikeyan, the first question I want to ask you is this. The Indian authorities are saying that this is the first salvo, the first big push towards his extradition. Is that how you see it?
Well, it is an important step. It is an important step because particularly when so much of allegations are going on that the government is not serious, CBI is not serious and all that, and people don't understand what it is to deal with such situations when people are living in a country like UK with their own laws and procedures, which is considered a safe haven for such people. And this is a very important step. I won't say that it is a great success to be celebrated, but it's an important step to be recognized. That shows the government is serious, the CBI is serious. There is no question of they're trying to protect somebody or save somebody. I mean, what else can happen? You can't go and arrest a man, somebody, put him in a plane and bring him to India. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. It can happen in India also. So it is an important step.
Why is UK seen as a safe haven, sir? Is it very difficult to get people extradited from certain countries?
Well, I don't know. Their laws obviously, it is obviously their laws and procedures are different in the name of human rights, in the name of freedom, in the name that, the host country should not, the fairness of the investigating procedure, trial and all that. Some countries will not allow to be repatriation unless you are sure that, they will not be sentenced to death. There are so many things. It's not easy. You can't discuss it in a debate like this. And it is known it's going to be difficult. It is going to be taking time consumer. The only thing you can say about what happened today is the government is serious, the CBI is serious. It is a very important first step. Yes, what will happen, either deportment or extradition, may take a longer time. It's very difficult to predict what will the attitude of the government of UK and also the courts in the United Kingdom. But certainly it proves that the government is serious about what they said they are going to do. And it's very important because, when loans are given to the poor farmers for cultivation, few thousands of rupees, either the crop fails because of too much of rain or no rain, or because of the pest diseases, or there is no market for them, and they are not able to repay the loan to the bank immediately. And there is so much harassment they are subject to. People are sent after them, and ultimately they are humiliated, and very often they commit suicide because to save the honor. In such a situation, how can thousands of crores of rupees of the taxpayers' money can be misused? Money laundering.
Yes.
And diverted for purposes for which they are not sanctioned.
So why do you think the government waited for a year, sir?
Helpless.
You sound convinced that the government is very sincere in its efforts to bring him back.
That you should ask. You should ask the government. I cannot speak for the government because I am not in the government. You ask the government, people are in charge. But I am only telling you the procedures are complicated, time consuming, not easy. And if they are very serious about it, it takes time. Whether they are taken all seriously or not, please ask the people in the government.
Absolutely. And what more do you think the government of India can do in this case at this point?
First step. Government of India can do it. They will have to do it because the media is after them. The people are expecting them, and they are given a promise that such a person will not be allowed to escape the law, and they cannot be allowed to defraud the nation. So that the government, what can they do? There are many things they can do. I'm sure they will do it.
Mandy, how does the India-UK extradition treaty work, and what has the success rate been like?
Well, we've only seen one extradition in the past, successful extradition in the past, since this treaty has been in effect. So it's just kind of over 20 years that it's been into effect. So it will be interesting to see because this is a very specific case. Normally, in the past, it's been commented that when it comes to white-collar crime, that's fraud. When people are taking money rather than murder or kind of more serious crimes, as it's often deemed, those people tend to get away with it. So in that regard, this extradition is really a test case on whether those white-collar crimes, when it comes to fraud and extortion, whether those are taken just as seriously, and we will see the extradition process happen. Of course, there is a whole bunch of legal red tape that they have to go through, just due process, and also ensuring that what the UK government, the UK courts, will be really looking at is whether human rights will be respected if they do send Vijay Mallya back, that he could be guaranteed a certain level of human rights that he could have expected through a British legal system. So if they get those assurances, there's hope that he will be sent back. And if this goes ahead, then there's other cases, white-collar crimes, that we'll see an increase in extradition. So it's an important test case, certainly for the relations and the process.
Mr. Karthikeyan, as Mandy said, one successful extradition from the UK in recent years to India. Research shows 60 Indians have been extradited so far. But there are a lot of other very high-profile cases that remain stuck, that remain in a limbo. How do you see India's record compared to other countries? And in your years in the CBI and as CBI chief, what were the bottlenecks? I'm sure there were times when you were frustrated because there were legal nitty-gritties you couldn't work around.
You're asking me?
Mr. Karthikeyan, yes.
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir.
You know, yeah, you see, I cannot give any accurate figures and all that. I don't want to speculate on that. On these questions, you must ask the present director CBI, give him time, notice to prepare and all that. So I have just come, I was in a function, I have just brought on to the camera
I'm trying to understand.
Prepared to answer all those questions.
I'm sure. I'm not asking for figures. I'm trying to understand the procedure.
It is difficult.
And for an investigative agency, yes.
I can only tell you, it's very difficult for, if it's difficult for the CBI, I can tell you others cannot just do it. A CBI is a expert body meant for that. They have got a lot of experience. But dealing with such situations, when the fugitive is living comfortably abroad with a lot of resources, he can engage the best of lawyers and they can go on. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is the determination of both the government and the CBI will only bring about a result. I can only say that what has happened today shows that, don't interfere with me. You can hope that the government will keep up the promise and do their best, and it's possible to do that. According to me, it is possible. It may take time, but it's possible.
And that is the other big question, Harpreet. I know you do not want to speculate, but given the way legal procedures tend to stretch, how long a period should the government of India and the people of India, this is a huge case in India, as I'm sure you've noticed, also with political connotations, how much time would it take to get Vijay Mallya extradited and brought back here?
Well, the process that follows is actually not going to be extremely complicated or extremely lengthy. The only point where there are going to be delays are where the court or Vijay Mallya's lawyers are going to ask for assurances and guarantees from India, and our lawyers, Indian lawyers, or actually the Serious Fraud Office or the CPS lawyers representing India, are going to have to seek instructions back from India, and they will have to wait for the documentation to come from India. So those are the procedural delays which are likely. Once all the documentation is in, the courts are generally swift in giving their judgment. And then of course there are appeals and so on, which take time, but the good part is that appeals don't require a lot of additional paperwork to be generated, so it's reasonably faster. I think more important than speculating about time is trying to make sure that we curb our enthusiasm about this. The courts in the UK are not going to be very thrilled if they see a situation where the courts or the prosecutors in India or the public in India have already prejudged him, and then he is in a very happy situation where he can go to the court and say, look at this, I have already been prejudged, there is absolutely no possibility of a fair trial in India, and the judges will find in his favor. So we need to curb our enthusiasm at this point.
That's good advice. My final question to you, Harpreet, is this. India makes a request, the British government is convinced and takes the matter to a district magistrate who issues an arrest warrant and then gives bail. Now the case is in that court for the judge to decide whether Vijay Mallya should be sent back to his country to face charges. What happens next if the court says yes, he should be allowed to go back to India or he should be sent back to India? What does the procedure from there on looks like?
Well, if the court makes a determination that there are no reasons why he should not be deported, it will make a mandatory order saying that he should be taken into custody and sent to India. But they are likely to provide enough time and space for him to make an appeal. He will make an appeal which goes on to the Court of Appeal. The judgment will be stayed as long as the matter is before the Court of Appeal. Following a judgment, assuming that it is successful, assuming that the appeal is not successful, and the Court of Appeal upholds the deportation order, he has a further right, and so on. And do bear in mind that so far the United Kingdom is still a part of the European Union, so we've got the European Court of Human Rights as well.
Well, it's a long road then. Dear Karthikeyan, Harpreet Jiani, Mandy Clark, appreciate all of you joining us here. Vijay Mallya, it seems, has escaped one more time, but the government of India is convinced that the procedure has begun and he will be brought back to the country to face charges. We'll, of course, follow that very closely for you. Taking a short break here on WION. Lots more coming up on the other side. Don't go.